It's very difficult to be intellectually honest and to go down the path of Islam, because there are some real contradictions. Muhammad came with a sword.
Fact check, true. That's a real problem.
Jesus came with a towel, and he served people.
Back in 2022, Andrew Tate announced his conversion to Islam. Now, that's fair enough, but a little odd coming from someone who declared that reading books was a waste of time, since Islam views the supreme revelation of God as coming from a book. But in response to that conversion, Patrick Bet-David asked a really good question of Cliffe Knechtle. And Cliffe is someone who interacts with college students all the time on college campuses, and he really gives a solid answer that's great for anyone to have in their back pocket if you've ever been challenged on why Christianity as opposed to Islam or whatever. So welcome, I'm Brett, and I've been a pastor a long time, and here at One Life Network, we love having these cultural conversations around belief and faith and those kinds of issues. So if you like that too, please hit subscribe. But let's check this out, and I want to highlight some things on the post side.
You know the best thing about Islam? The best thing about Islam is how simple it is, because there's wrong and right.
It's a simple religion.
Well, it's wrong and right. I mean, you look at other religions and it's also subjective now.
Yeah.
And that's why I've said many times on different podcasts that it's the last true religion. If you don't have a strong barrier, if you don't have a yes and a no, you don't have a religion. If you tolerate everything, you stand for nothing. And if you believe in God and you say, I believe in God, but I'm not a Muslim, I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. You're a Christian. What is Christianity anymore? What does it mean? You can go to a Christian country, and America, let's take, for example, and you'll get in more trouble for insulting George Floyd than you will for insulting Jesus Christ.
Yeah, for sure.
You can walk down walk down the street with a t-shirt saying Jesus is gay. Girls barely go to church. If they do, who knows what they were doing the night before. None of it means anything. And then if you go and find a Christian that says this trans person has changed gender, what do you think about that? Christians are so soft, they're going to go, well, I hope he finds redeem, and I hope he finds guidance. Haram, bro. Haram. No, you didn't. It's haram. And I like that it's yes and no. And what's the point in a religion if you're too afraid to say what you believe in, or afraid to stick up for it, or afraid to defend it? Then what's the point in any of it?
Well, one of the questions real quick on that is, what if you did have it that way and it were just that right and wrong and that's it and that's what you're judged by? How would you do before a creator who assessed you purely on those issues? But here's the part where Patrick Bet-David asked a good question.
I'm watching Andrew Tate goes from being a Christian to being a Muslim, okay? And believe it or not, he's got a lot of influence with young men. So, hey man, I love what this guy has to say. I agree with him. Why would a guy as great of a communicator as him and as many followers as he has, why would he become Muslim? I'm curious. I'm willing to bet he influenced a lot of other young men to also become Muslims. Cool, let's put that there. Christianity, okay? Catholic, we can put these together, right? Judaism, you're seeing what's going on here. How do you differ? If you were to, in a very basic way, as a professor, as a pastor, what is the difference between being a Christian, between being a Jew, between being a Muslim?
To his credit, that's a big question, and to Cliffe's credit, he does a really good job of boiling all that down.
All right. So Jews believe that Jesus was not the Messiah and was not a good prophet. And he obviously wasn't God. Muslims believe that Jesus was a very good prophet, and a typical devout Muslim has far more respect for Jesus than a typical American, because a devout Muslim believes that Jesus was born of a virgin, lived a sinless life, and because he was such a good prophet, God would never allow him to die on a cross, so he took him to heaven. So the cross and the resurrection are wiped out, but a devout Muslim believes that Jesus is going to return a second time. So they believe in Jesus as a good prophet. Repeatedly in the Quran, Muhammad says Jesus is not God. But in the New Testament, the eyewitnesses who saw and heard Christ insisted Jesus claimed to be God by both his words and his actions. Mark chapter 2, he forgives the sins of a man who's lowered on a mat from the ceiling, never even seen the guy before, and all the religious people say that's blasphemy. Only God can forgive sin. Yeah, by claiming to forgive the sin of that guy, Jesus is claiming to be God. And in John 8:58, Jesus says, before Abraham was born, I am. And the Jews did not call God G-O-D, they called him I am, Yahweh. And Jesus very intentionally took the name of the eternal pre-existent God, applied it to himself, and they picked up stones to stone him for blasphemy. So, you see, the basic issue is who is Jesus? And Judaism, Islam, and Christianity disagree. Now, here's my problem with Islam. I have a lot of respect for the fact that one of the 5 pillars of Islam is give alms to the poor. I respect that. Obviously, Jesus taught that. I appreciate that Muhammad had a very high view of Jesus as a good prophet. But here's some of the problems with it.
It's also a good question to ask, where does the good opinion come from? Because a lot of people don't know that Islam does have a very high view of Jesus, but what's the source of it is a good thing to ask.
The miracle of Islam is not a person, it's a book, the Quran. In order to know that revelation, the clear revelation of God, the Quran, best, you have to learn Arabic. In other words, God is revealing himself in Arabic most clearly. The miracle of Christianity is not a book, it's not the Bible, it's Jesus Christ, the person who is God in human form. So, am I going to be attracted to a religion that says, Arabic, that's what you got to go? Or no, Jesus loves the world and gives him his life for everybody. Second difference is, Muhammad came with a sword. And let's be honest, it was not pretty for North Africa and for Europe, what the Muslims did. And one of the largest churches in the 2nd and 3rd century was in Egypt, and that church got slaughtered. So Muhammad came with a sword.
Fact check, true. That's a real problem.
Jesus came with a towel, and he served people. And I am convinced that the reason that more people are followers of Christ than any other religion is because of his love, his serving, as well as his truth that he outlined very, very clearly. So those are 2 of the reasons that I think it's very difficult to be intellectually honest and to go down the path of Islam, because there are some real contradictions. The third one is this. Muhammad was born in 570 AD, lived till about 632 AD. So obviously he never met Jesus. He insisted that Jesus never claimed to be God. Sorry, the eyewitnesses who saw Jesus, who heard Jesus, clearly wrote he claimed to be God. Now, who am I going to trust? Am I going to trust a guy who was born 570 years after the fact, who obviously never met Jesus? Or am I going to trust the eyewitnesses? Well, that's a no-brainer. Every single time I want to find out about any historical figure, I want to press the information back as far as I can, hopefully to the eyewitnesses. So Jesus clearly claimed to be God, which is a fundamental philosophical and religious mistake that Muhammad and the Quran are making when they deny the deity of Christ.
Well, I very much appreciate Cliff just kind of boiling it down where those are the really key issues in a brief way. But let's kind of go back over there. First of all, the miracle, I like that he says the miracle of Islam is a book. That's the Quran, and it's in Arabic. But the miracle of Christianity is a person. Even the Bible would say that. And that's very, very important to remember. I've said on the channel before, I did a lot of work in Muslim countries. I had a good friend of mine who had been a Muslim. He was born into that society, and he converted. And the reason he did is because he happened to find a New Testament that was translated into his language. And because he lived in one, it wasn't Arabic. He had heard Arabic his whole life, but he didn't know what it meant. And he read that Jesus rose again from the dead and the claims of Jesus and became a Christian for that simple reason. The second thing that he says and points out, and this is something we point out on the channel as well, is that Islam came with a sword. I love the way he puts this. Islam came with a sword and Jesus came with a towel. What does that say about the nature of God, about the nature of what's most important in life? And it is just a fact of history that Islam spread very quickly in the ancient world because they marshaled armies and went and invaded many places that were predominantly Christian. And that's true to this day. And then the third thing is this whole thing, this is nearly 600 years after Jesus was on the earth. 600 years, that's a really, really long time, especially put it on the scale of like how long America's been around. Think about that level of time. And Muhammad just kind of comes up and says Jesus never claimed certain things, which I actually think is very intriguing because they do have a high view of Jesus, but where did that come from and why? So they're believing the New Testament on one hand, but on the other hand, they extract out away the things that he did say in regards to his divinity and others said about his divinity, like Paul and Peter and John and the others. And we've talked about that as well. As a matter of fact, if you're interested in digging into that whole thing and the real question of it, we did a video where Alex O'Connor made the challenge that Jesus never claimed to be God. You can look at the answer on there, and it's really helpful to kind of see how that came about, and it's good at answering Islam as well. Hope all of that helps. See you next time.